Welcome back, Better Call Saul friends. Today, we are going to talk about 9 ways that Better Call Saul could have ended differently. I have gone through dozens of interviews with Bob Odenkirk, Rhea Seehorn, Peter Gould, Vince Gilligan, and I've basically compiled 9 different scenarios, 9 different alternate endings that they were thinking about for this last episode of Better Call Saul. Also, before we get into it, spoilers for all of Better Call Saul, spoilers for Breaking Bad, and spoilers for El Camino, the movie. If you have not seen any of those 3, please do not watch this video. And then a quick programming note before we get started. I just went through my list of video ideas. I've got 14 video ideas I want to write about over the next couple months. After that, I want to ask you and put it in the comment section below what you want to do. But I'm thinking we can either do a rewatch of Better Call Saul from the beginning, we could do a rewatch of Breaking Bad, or we can do a different show. I know House of the Dragon, the Game of Thrones prequel comes out today. I have not seen Game of Thrones, so I actually might check that out. But I've heard some not so great things about it. But that those are from like critic reviews, so I haven't seen the actual show. So maybe we'll talk about that as well. Let me know in the comments section below what you want to do on this channel. Let's jump into those 9 different things that I've got for us, though. The first different scenario that they had is they actually filmed the last scene with Kim giving those finger guns back to Gene. Now, I'm going to share an interview with EW and Rhea Seehorn. And I'm going to put the screenshots up on the video so you can follow along with me. I will not read word for word because it gets really long and I don't want to, just repeat multiple paragraphs for you guys. But the interviewer asked, hey, what's going on with the finger guns? Jimmy gives those finger guns and that has a lot of weight on the show. What do those finger guns mean to you? And Ray says, well, we shot a couple different iterations, including ones where Kim shoots the finger guns back at him. It was very small, it was not animated, it was not with a smile, but still, in the end, Peter decided that it looked too much like they were saying Kim is back in the game. And that's not what Peter wanted to convey to the audience. And then in the next screenshot, Ray says that, what's going on there with Jimmy giving the finger guns is open to interpretation. And is it saying, hey, we had a great run and everything's okay? Is it him saying we're still great together? We could still do something legally together? Is it him saying, I still believe in this relationship? So there's a lot of different things going on in terms of what those finger guns exactly mean. And that is open to interpretation. I thought it was just so interesting that they actually did film Kim giving those finger guns back. I hope we see that in the Blu-ray deleted scenes that hopefully they're going to put out in the next, year or so. I would love to see that. I personally would have liked to see Kim give those finger guns back because I did not take that as, they're back in the game, they're in on a scheme. I just took it as, as a symbol of their emotional connection, of the fun that they had. And of the entirety of their relationship was not tragic. It was not all bad. There was a lot of great parts to it. Also, one other thing I want to point out here, and I'm going to put up screenshots of the actual episode. I want to give a shout out to UD Reviews who pointed this out to me on my channel. But there is a theory going around that Kim actually gave a very subtle version of those finger guns back at Jimmy at her waist. So if you zoom in on this picture right here, where Kim is looking at Jimmy right after he gave those finger guns, you look at her fingers and they're in a somewhat unnatural position. So it's not just someone's hand down at their waist. So is that Kim right there? Is that Kim's hand right there giving Jimmy a very subtle finger guns back at him? Now I did, and I want to hear what you think in the comment section below. I did see an article from Screen Rant, and I'm not sure how reliable they are, but they said Kim can be seen making a slight pistol shape with her hand in that scene. I have not, however, seen Rhea Seehorn or Peter Gould confirm 100% that that was intentional and that's what she's actually doing there. So hopefully there's going to be some kind of question about that and we're going to get some kind of clarity on that. But again, I'm going to put UD Reviews video on that in the section down below. Shout out to her for pointing that out to me. Okay, the second alternate ending, the way they could have ended Better Call Saul differently, is they had an alternate ending of Jimmy sitting alone in his jail cell thinking at the end of the series. Now, let me pull up my quote here. And Peter Gould said, "I don't know how much to reveal, but when we first broke the episode, when the writers first decided how the arc of the episode was going to go, the two of them, Kim and Jimmy, were meeting in Albuquerque before he went to prison, and the last scene was him in prison by himself thinking." And I like that a lot, but it seemed a little bold, and I think ultimately we felt like ending with the two of them felt like the strongest way to go. This would have been a much more melancholy ending as opposed to, in my mind, the somewhat happy ending that we got, of course, depending on how you view that last episode. Now, this scene here of Jimmy ending alone in prison in his jail cell just thinking actually ties in with the next potential ending that they thought of, which is my third point, which is that prison would be rough for Jimmy. And so let me pull up my screenshot here. Gould added that the original final scene found Jimmy in a place of fear rather than contentment. He says, in the original version, he was fearful about what was going to happen to him in prison. It was a lot about the fear, and this is a very different scene, the one they actually did. This final scene, the one they actually did, is mostly about connection and wistful connection. I have one more here. And then they ultimately decided not to go with it because, as Peter says, I think the other side of it was, if we had just said he's going to this awful prison, you're going to picture every cliche about what happens to people in prison. And we wanted to give a feel for what he's actually going to experience. And the suffering he's in for is pretty much the suffering he deserves, i.e. Jimmy's not going to get beaten up in the prison yard. He's not going to, get picked on and all these other terrible things that I don't even want to say about, our stereotypes about what happens in prison, although they may not be stereotypes. I haven't looked into that much. And so they wanted to give Jimmy a more hopeful ending of being in prison and not this fear-based ending that they did consider. I am sure that they avoided this element of fear on Jimmy's part by adding in that bus scene with all the prisoner inmates chanting "Better Call Saul." I personally did not love that scene, but I see what they were going for and why they added it. They wanted us to know that Jimmy would be fine in prison. He's not going to get beaten up and hurt. He's going to fit in with everyone else there and make the best of his very tough situation. The fourth scenario that they floated is another alternate ending, which would be the last scene would be Kim and Jimmy in the jail cell together. And so let's pull that one up here. Peter Gould said he was on the bubble when it came to the very last scene of the episode that they actually did, the one where they are walking, where Kim's walking away from Jimmy, and they nearly cut that final moment exchange silently between Kim and Jimmy across the prison yard. And Gould says there was a version that didn't have the prison yard scene that ended with the two of them smoking in that room. I went back and forth on that for a while, and ultimately, having watched them both, I felt like it was right. It felt more honest to end with the two of them apart rather than the two of them together. As Gould said, he did not want them to be together at the very end, so they decided to separate them, and now we're all left to speculate. Does Kim visit Jimmy? Is this the last that she sees of him? What does their relationship look like moving forward with him in jail? I'm actually surprised by the number of people out there who think that this might have been the last time that Kim sees Jimmy. I think she absolutely goes to visit him. And I think she might go to visit him often. I don't know if she's going to relocate from Florida. And I guess the prison's in Colorado, if I'm remembering correctly. But at least once a year, I think Kim's going to come out to visit Jimmy. But what do you think? Put it in the comments below. The fifth alternate scenario that they had, and I guess I'm kind of cheating here because this is an alternate scenario for a different movie. Again, spoiler alerts for El Camino, but they considered ending El Camino with Jesse in jail. Now, I have a few quotes here, and I'm going to go to the first one is actually from Vince Gilligan in 2019, and Vince obviously wrote El Camino, and he's going to be talking about a potential ending for El Camino. Again, I'm not going to read this whole thing, but if you see basically what he's saying in this long quote, pause the video if you want to read the whole thing. He's basically saying, In El Camino, Jesse would be scrambling. He wouldn't be able to get a lot of sleep because his adrenaline's so high. He's running around. He's trying to do all of this stuff. He'd try and help someone up in the Canadian border. He would get caught. And then at the very end of the movie, he would be in a jail cell. And for the first time, in a week, 10 days, he can finally fall asleep like a baby, because, it's kind of all over. And Vince actually pitched this to Peter Gould and the writers of Better Call Saul. And those folks, according to Vince, said you can't have Jesse in a jail cell at the end of the movie. People will tar and feather you if you do that. And so that's kind of the change that Vince made. And obviously, if you've seen El Camino, you know how it ends there. It does not end with Jesse in jail. Now, let's fast forward to 2022, just last week, when Peter Gould actually commented on this conversation that he and Vince had about how it was going to end. And Peter Gould said, basically, in season 4 or 5, which is, I think, around the same time that Vince was doing El Camino, they had the idea that Saul would end up in jail. And Vince comes into the room and he pitches an ending of El Camino, which is very similar to what they did with Better Call Saul, except Jesse would be the one in jail. And so Peter ends up saying that, hey, there was a great pitch. It was beautifully done. But some of us kind of pushed back on Jesse being in jail at the end, and they said, you know what about you doing a different ending for Jesse, Vince? And Vince followed through on that and made a different ending for Jesse. And so this was really interesting, because if Vince had stuck to what he was going to do originally and he ends with Jesse in jail, I do not think that they would have ended with Saul in jail. My guess is that they would have done 2 different endings for those 2 characters. I don't think they would have wanted them to go out in the exact same way. So that's kind of interesting that, by Vince kind of avoiding the jail scenario with Jesse and El Camino, it ends up with Saul being in jail in Better Call Saul. The 6th way that they could have ended the show differently is they could have had more dialogue with Kim and Jimmy in jail in that last scene that they have together in the jail cell room. Peter Gould said, I had pared down that scene. There were versions of that scene that I had written where there was just a lot more said and a lot of catching up. And he just kept making it leaner and leaner as he worked on it, because in a weird way, they don't have to say much to each other. They've come to a conclusion. And also in this quote at the very top, Rhea Seehorn says that Peter is great at not overwriting and trusting us and trusting the audience. I think this was a great removal on Peter's part. It's not surprising to me in the least, because there's already so much emotion between these characters, and the show clearly knows how to use that to portray what it wants to portray without having to spoon feed the audience. The 7th thing that they changed in the ending for Better Call Saul is they actually originally intended to use more color in the Gene scenes. And Peter says here, we were a little scared about having so much of the show in black and white. So for a long time, there was the idea of getting into Gene's timeline and then switching to color. He ultimately says that, we didn't think we should go for that, and it might give the wrong feel to those scenes. So as I said in my episode 13 review, I loved the cigarette lighting. The one light in the Kim and Jimmy scene is that cigarette, and I am not sure how they would have integrated color into those final scenes or the final episodes while still maintaining the symbolism of that beautiful light on the cigarette that they shared. So I'm really confident that this was the right choice, simply because I don't think you can get the emotional reaction of that cigarette and the lighting and the symbolism there with the entire scene in full color. I just would have removed it completely. Also, in the very last scene where they say goodbye, at least for now, I'm not sure how or if I would have liked to see that scene in color. I just don't see how it would have integrated well. So it was probably the best decision to keep it black and white for the entirety of the episode, with the exception of that very small cigarette lighting. Although I personally would have loved to see Jimmy's final suit in court and see that in color, or see him in his orange jail jumpsuit. But guess what? There's an easy solution to that for me. I can just go to the Better Call Saul Instagram page and I can see it there. So I am happy, and I think this was ultimately a good decision to keep it almost all black and white for the entirety of that last episode. The eighth thing that they thought about was spending more time on Gene running away. And Peter says that the finale ended up considerably longer than what aired. And so he had to cut some things, including some directorial flourishes, I'm not sure what that means, as well as a, quote, couple of scenes of the chase in the opening that we took out, because I think it was important to all of us, especially to me, that it would feel like another episode of this show and not some kind of giant double truck movie finale, because it's not. This episode is very much in keeping with the last few, so it was important not to feel excessively weighty or slow. This one made a lot of sense to me after the fact, because I was personally surprised during the episode that Gene was caught so quickly, and so it made sense that, the episode I think was like 70 or so minutes long already, and they had to trim it back what they originally wanted to do. I guess the moral of the story for us is that if you are a criminal, don't go to Omaha, because if your name gets in an arrest warrant, they are going to catch you quite quickly. The ninth thing is that they were originally not going to have a Chuck flashback. I am going to play some audio from the Insider podcast. I'm not great at editing this stuff, so hopefully you can hear the audio well enough.
Shot that so early. At that point, we didn't know that Chuck was going to show up in the final episode. Chuck was an addition after we broke the episode. I felt like, I'll take responsibility. I felt like there was something missing from the script as we'd worked it out. And so I felt strongly that there had to be a Chuck scene, but it took me the longest time to try to figure out what that scene could be.
Now, I love how these writers, and especially Peter Gould, really feel the episode. They feel the episode as they create it. It's not set in stone. You get to navigate what should happen as you create the show. They have a dynamic, ever-changing method for creating the show. It's not static, and that opens up opportunities for creativity. And personally, on my hierarchy of flashbacks, I think Chuck is more important to Jimmy's story than a flashback of Walt or Jesse or both of them. So I am really glad that they were able to bring Chuck back in one last time. All right, folks, those are the 9 different ways that they could have ended Better Call Saul differently. I really agree with almost all of these, except, of course, I would have liked to see Kim explicitly give those finger guns, but that's okay. That is all I have for today. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and again, I have plenty more Better Call Saul videos, so I will be talking to you about those soon. Have a great day. Bye.
Jimmy, what's going on in there? Jimmy! Oh, you can hear this through the door?
If you're committed enough, you can make any story work. I once convinced a woman that I was Kevin Costner, and it worked because I believed it.
You are not Kevin Costner.
I was last night.